Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we are back with another React video. Today we're going to be checking out more Hamilton. We're going to be wrapping up the musical pretty soon, which is kind of crazy. We've been doing it forever. So I'm going to be doing a lot of Hamilton videos in the near future, so if you're a big fan of the Hamilton stuff, good news for you, you're going to get a lot more. If you're not a big fan of the Hamilton stuff, good news for you, you're not going to get that much more because we're almost done. So when we're done, we get to put it behind us and move on to some other stuff. So if there's any other music-related stuff you want me to check out, I've had my eye on Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. I checked out the first song. It seems very interesting, so that's one that I have to spend another like a year and a half on if you guys are interested in that. So today we're going to be wrapping up the King George III trilogy of songs with I Know Him. This song takes place after George Washington steps down and before the Adams administration song. So that's where we are for those of you who are here more for the history than you are for the musical stuff. So there we go. I'm excited about this. This is a very interesting point for King George III. There's definitely something to talk about here. There's been more to talk about in these songs than I thought there would be. I was originally just going to skip over them because, like, what do I have to say about King George III? Maybe not that much, but there's more than I thought there was. So maybe there's going to be even more here than I thought. And I think there's actually going to be something here. We're getting into the Adams administration. That's my thing. All right. Let's get this started. Jasmin McPines on the Animatic. We haven't checked out her stuff in a little while. I remember her though.
They say George Washington's yielding his power and stepping away. Is that true? I wasn't aware that was something a person could do.
So let's refresh on George Washington and his unique position here. As president, they didn't have term limits yet. Right now, you can be president for 2 terms and then you're done. There's no way of getting back in. But in the case of George Washington, he could have run forever because they hadn't instituted term limits yet, and he decided to step down. One of the cool elements of George Washington's life is that he did not have a biological son. So if there was any monarchical tendency there, it was kind of mitigated by the fact that he didn't have a blood relative to pass the throne of America down to. So if he wanted to be king, if he wanted to have like some sort of a kingly dynasty there, the materials just were not there. So that's another reason why a lot of people trusted George Washington. He was the most trusted man in America. It's kind of crazy. And King George III is said to have said, if George Washington steps down, gives away his power, he would be among like the greatest men in the world. It's questionable whether or not that conversation actually happened. It very well might have, but there is a little bit of question behind it, so don't take it too seriously. It's been quoted in some very good history books, but a lot of things that didn't happen were quoted in very good, otherwise very good history books. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But if he did say that's huge. That's the guy that you just broke off of. And you know what, King George, I'll give him a little credit. He was an all right sport in loss. He took the Americans back as top trading allies. He didn't try to crush them afterwards, more or less. We did have a little bit of tension on the seas that's going to lead to a certain War of 1812, but we're not there yet, and we're not going to talk about that in this video. I don't want to.
I'm perplexed. Are they going to keep on replacing whoever's in charge? If so, who's next?
Yeah, the idea of the peaceful transition of power, which was pretty successful, remarkably, throughout most of American history. We've had a couple gaffes. Recently, we've had one. But as far as peaceful transition of power goes, a lot of people didn't think that was gonna be possible that whoever was in charge would try to cling on to power. And the fact that George Washington stepped down and everybody respected him for it, it set the precedent for the office, and a lot of people wanted to replicate what George Washington did. Come in, do your duty, and leave and be this respected American figure. It incentivized the peaceful transition of power. That's kind of crazy. In a world where people didn't even think a large-scale republic could work. A lot of people thought, hey, if you're like this tiny little rinky-dink place, maybe you could have a republic, but if you have this big, vast land, which the United States, even in their early history before expansion, pretty darn big. They couldn't maintain a republic. That's not how republics work. They're supposed to be small. And the fact that this very major element worked out, it's really a nice moment for the American dream of government. Not the American dream in the popular sense, but the projected ideas for American government.
There's nobody else in their country who looms quite as large. John Adams?
There's nobody in the country that looms quite as large. There's the mystique around George Washington, and then there's his actual height. He was a tall dude, 6'3", 6'4". He was tall. And a lot of the greatest leaders ever were unusually tall for their time. That's an interesting thing. Like, tall people are more likely to get into positions of power. That's just how it is. Is it how people perceive them? Is being tall give you some sort of a psychological edge on power? I'm no psychologist, but it is a very common trend there. And then you're going from George Washington to John Adams. How tall was John Adams? He was like 5'6", I think. So he was about my height. And I'm not a super tall dude. I don't cut a very imposing figure. And he was chubby. So he's short and chubby. It makes him look less imposing. People are going to make fun of his weight a lot, make fun of his height a lot. John Adams, he's difficult. Let's just say George Washington was a hard act to follow, and John Adams made some of the worst mistakes. Like, he had some points in his presidency where he could have been remembered very fondly, but like a couple of choices that he made, mainly the Alien and Sedition Act, which cracked down on immigrants and freedom of the press, mainly that kind of destroyed his legacy. It's unfortunate for the dude, because he had some revolutionary credentials. He should have been a big deal.
I know him. That can't be. That's that little guy who spoke to me all those years ago. What was it? 85. That poor man, they're going to eat him alive. Oh shit.
Oh, I don't think he'd like wish for them to eat him alive. I don't think he'd take necessarily delight in that, and he didn't seem to have a bad relationship with John Adams. John Adams just wasn't generally close to a lot of people, but it seemed like they got along. This is based on John Adams' history as a foreign diplomat during the war. He spent some time in France, then he spent some time in England. He met the king after the war and tried to create a little bit of peace there. He also secured a massive Dutch loan, which helped to finance the revolution a little longer. John Adams, as a foreign diplomat, is one of the most successful of the revolution. It's kind of crazy. People poke fun at his time overseas, but he did pretty well, just because he didn't get French customs and he was a little bit awkward in France. But overall, I would say his time as a diplomat was quite successful. So give him a little bit of credit there. And I've already come out as a bit of a John Adams fan, but I say that admitting that not really as a human being. Like, I know his flaws and whatever. I just kind of find his flaws so human that I find him very fun to learn about.
Rise, empires fall. Next to Washington, they all look small. All alone, watch them run. They will tear each other into pieces. Jesus Christ, this will be fun. Da, 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 da.
Yeah, again, I don't think he would take crazy delight in this. Maybe he'd have a little bit of resent, but like this is definitely an exaggerated level of delight, as you would expect from a musical.
President John Adams. Good luck.
Yeah, he's gonna need it. John Adams is going to be president during a very difficult time. There's going to be conflict on the high seas with seizure of American ships during conflict between the French and British, and they're not really respecting neutral shipping. So we actually get in the quasi-war, which is kind of a war, but not a war. It was a war. It was a mini-war with France, even though the American Navy was not very good. But John Adams was also a big part of squashing conflict with France in the end. He would have actually benefited from going to war with France, because the more conflict they had with France, the more people got behind the American president. Often when war breaks out, people get behind the leader. Often during crisis, people get behind the leader. Sometimes they don't, but that's something he could have taken advantage of if he was a more cynical actor and gotten himself elected, but he didn't, which... good on him for that. That's probably the best thing about his presidency, that he squashed a potential larger war with France that a lesser president would have walked right into. Figures like Alexander Hamilton, at first, he didn't really want to go to war with France, but after a while, he started realizing that he'd be at the forefront of that, and he's like, yeah, we got to do something about this. Yeah, so John Adams ended up squashing that, and by extension, Alexander Hamilton's military career, which is probably for the best, because Hamilton was a little bit too ambitious for his own good. Yeah, that was a really fun jam right there. I like the King George songs. Like I've said, he's a very good tool for exposition. There's an exaggerated nature to his character or whatever, but it's all right. I'm kind of surprised. There's a lot of stuff to work with King George that they didn't. One of them is his noticeable stutter. I was wondering when I first heard about his role in the musical if he would have that and like how that would translate. It's a rap musical. Maybe you could do some interesting stuff with a character with a stutter or a stammer or whatever. But I'm kind of glad they didn't do that and just kind of went for broad, musically, stylistically different, representing kind of the idea of the outside looking in just as much as he represents King George III himself. A very big part of this character seems to be just like a view of everything from the outside. That's why he is such a narrator and kind of catches us up on things, because he's just observing. That's really cool. So I'm going to be continuing the Hamilton songs. We only have a handful left, and maybe some of those little bonus tracks I might do at some point in the future. I intend on it, but I'm going to rush through the main musical over the next however long it takes. So we'll see how well that goes. Thank you guys for watching and continuing to support these videos. I really like doing them. And I will see you tomorrow with another video. Will it be Hamilton? I guess we'll see. I never know. All right. Later.